As I was wondering what was going on, Director Brown walked up briskly and casually slapped my shoulder, saying, "Good job, Daniel, you're fired as of today." Just like that, I was abruptly thrown out of the company where I had worked for 20 years. "It's been a while, President Johnson." Actually, I was just fired. In my words, President Johnson was speechless for a moment. "What about the patent?" "The company will go bankrupt without my patent, but since I'm fired, I'll be leaving." "What?" All I could do was laugh, but then I heard President Johnson's bewildered voice. "My name is Daniel Harrison. I'm a 45-year-old salaried worker. Originally, I worked at a maintenance workshop, but about 20 years ago, I got to know someone at a seminar, and through that connection, I joined the same company as him. I've always liked assembling machinery and inventing. So I think it was a stroke of luck to be placed in the product development department. The person I met at the seminar seems to be in a significant position at a major company. And it was because of his introduction that I could join this company. Normally, with my academic background, I wouldn't even have qualified to apply for a job opening. While grateful to him, I have worked furiously for 20 years. I built good relationships with other employees in the product development department. And before I knew it, I became the central figure in development. And eventually assumed the position of section chief. From then on, everyone came to me with various consultations. And I was able to engage in more innovative and large-scale developments. As a result of our unity, some products won design awards. And we were able to create hit products that represent the company. As long as the series of those products exists, the company will be secure. I am proud of having created such products. And it seems that the employees also gained confidence in themselves. The product development department had been sailing smoothly. But dark clouds began to gather one day. There was a change in personnel, and the director changed. Until then, we had a kind director who listened to us. But the newly appointed Director Brown was a very arrogant person. He had no interest in our research and development, only caring about the profits that came from it. He forced us to develop only such products, and if development was delayed, he would shout and force us to work overtime until we caught up. The once bright workplace had now turned into hell. And so, my conflict with Director Brown began. I sought daily improvements in our operations, but it would end with him saying, "If you have time to say such things, work." Even if I worked, most of the plans I presented for new product development were ignored. And I was demanded to make meaningless improvements. Moreover, if a plan was accepted and moved towards productization, I was rushed until completion with unreasonable instructions, and if it couldn't be completed, overtime continued until it was done. Once we managed to get a product out and it passed inspection and was released, all the achievements and merits were claimed by the director. Before I knew it, everything from the authorship of the plans to everything else was being rewritten. As a result, employee motivation was declining. And those who could no longer stand it began to leave the company. As a result, only those who couldn't afford to quit immediately for their family and living remained. Knowing that these employees couldn't choose to quit, the director started to exploit us even more. Overtime became a norm, and we were even made to handle the director's tasks. The director would use us as he pleased, leaving all the remaining tasks to be completed within the day, and leaving at the official end of the workday. As a result, the remaining vast amount of work continued to be barely managed by the reduced staff. I pleaded with the director to increase the staff, but, of course, my words were ignored. "It's just the weak ones who quit. Cover for them with those who remain." The person himself had absolutely no interest in development work, and did not get involved or help at all. Indeed, it was a relief that a director who had never been involved in development before could not interfere. However, high-quality products and plans were constantly demanded. Moreover, no matter how good the things we created were, they would ultimately be taken away. And the days continued when the employees were just being exploited for labor. And we quietly despaired. Watching the employees grow haggard day by day, I was thinking about what to do. At this rate, the product development department would be ruined. Everyone has high skills after having worked so hard up to this point. Honestly, they could make it even if they went to other companies. However, it would take time until reemployment is decided. And in the case of voluntary resignation, the retirement allowance would be reduced. I also feared that the director wouldn't let us resign normally. So, in the end, we had no choice but to stay. Certainly, we were receiving salaries as employees. But considering the overtime hours, it wasn't worth it. Despite exceeding the designated working hours, the director seemed to be covering up that fact. Maybe I had no choice but to talk directly to the higher-ups. But I would prefer to leave that as a last resort. I have a lot of thoughts about the director. But I have an attachment to this company and don't want to escalate things and worsen the company's image. Do they really want to make their company a toxic company by imposing such service overtime? If such rumors spread because of the actions of one director, the company would take a great hit. Then, it wouldn't just be a problem for the product development department. Depending on the situation, the company could greatly decline. And many people would become unemployed. Why on earth did such a person become a director? I love this company and the work, but I cannot agree with the old prioritization of seniority. In reality, such things are happening where people unrelated to the work are appointed to important positions like director and exploit the employees without understanding the job. I don't intend to deny all the old ways and methods, but it's certain that many harmful customs remain now. The director's favorite saying was, "In the past, this was normal." It's normal for subordinates to respect their superiors. Such arrogance might have been acceptable in the past. But it's not that era anymore, and I wish they would realize that. And someone has to say that. Then, that role must be mine as the section chief. I steeled my heart and decided to have a serious talk with the director. "So, what do you want?" That day, I called Director Brown to the conference room. Naturally, Director Brown didn't try to hide his displeasure, but he did agree to talk. "I have a dinner meeting after this. You guys have too much free time," Director Brown said with a laugh, but we weren't free at all. On the contrary, we were cutting back on daily sleep because of the director. "Director Brown, I would like you to change your behavior. Do you understand that what you are doing may be illegal?" "Huh? What are you talking about? You guys are just volunteering to work overtime. I've never forced or recommended overtime," Director Brown said calmly, laying out such lies. Deeply dismayed by a director who didn't realize that someone could put the company in jeopardy. "The employees are at their limit. Please return the achievements and rights you took from them. I'm begging you," I pleaded. However, Director Brown laughed heartily. "What are you talking about? You guys are happy working under me, right? You like your job, so you won't quit. Right? That's not true at all. Everyone is at their limit. Do you intend to destroy this department as it is? If it collapses at this level, then that's all it is," Director Brown said, and then pushed past me and left through the door. I hadn't thought that he wouldn't understand at all. I sighed deeply. I must report this to the higher-ups somehow. Reluctantly, I stayed late with the employees that day before heading home. The next day, as I was thinking about how to have a proper conversation with the upper management, all eyes were on me as I entered the room. As I wondered what was going on, Director Brown walked up briskly and casually slapped my shoulder, saying, "Good job, Daniel, you're fired as of today." Just like that, I was abruptly thrown out of the company where I had worked for 20 years. Holding my bag and standing dumbfounded outside the office building, anger gradually began to rise within me. I took out my mobile phone and called a certain number. It's been a while, Daniel. It's rare to get a call from you. The person who answered was President Johnson, who had invited me to this company. I should tell him the details. It's been a while, President Johnson. Actually, I was just fired. In my words, President Johnson was speechless for a moment. What about the patent? The company will go bankrupt without my patent, but since I'm fired, I'll be leaving. What? All I could do was laugh, but then I heard President Johnson's bewildered voice. After that, I had to head back to the company I had just left. I was called to the president's office by President Johnson. What in the world is going on? Can you explain? Sitting across from him on a sofa, I took a sip of the coffee he offered. President Johnson. What exactly were you thinking by appointing Brown as the head of product development? I did approve his appointment, but I didn't think there was a particular problem. Is that because of seniority? At my words, President Johnson quietly nodded. Well, it is a tradition. If there's no particular issue, promotion is the usual step. Was he truly a man without issues? What exactly happened in the product development department? My question made President Johnson look serious. Then, I reported in detail what had happened so far. The president listened quietly without interrupting. After I finished everything, he apologized. I had no idea such things were happening. I'm truly sorry. It's not something you should apologize for, President Johnson. Well, indeed, you do bear some responsibility. That's correct. As the president of this company, I am responsible for the actions of the employees. President Johnson sighed heavily and drooped his shoulders. The fact that such a thing happened during my tenure means that I am not respected enough as a leader. Moreover, to have you fired. Yes. Perhaps it was a result of acting out of emotion without knowing about my patent. But it was still reckless. I said in a dismayed tone. Director Brown might have fired me to make an example, as I was a vocal critic. But I hold numerous patents from my 20 years of working in product development at this company. The loss to the company if I left would be immeasurable, especially if I moved to a rival firm. Director Brown just endangered his own company merely to flaunt his power. His actions were childish and thoughtless, and they gave me a headache. However, President Johnson seemed to think differently. Indeed, since Mr. Brown became a director, the performance has been good. But there have been no reports of extreme achievements. Looking into my eyes, he continued. Rather, since he became a director, there have been many resignations. I hadn't heard anything about overtime or stealing plans. Certainly, through HR, the high number of resignations would have been communicated. But where did the planning documents and awards that I thought Director Brown had monopolized go? From the company's side, bonuses and awards are supposed to go to the proposers. Not Director Brown, but you haven't received those, have you? He asked, emphasizing his point, and I nodded firmly. Yes. If they had received them, many employees who resigned would have stayed. The younger and more talented ones left the company because they couldn't endure the environment. That is a significant loss. Really, why do such factional disputes have to happen? What do you mean by that? I asked for the true intent behind President Johnson's words. It seems there was a factional dispute when President Johnson took his position, with another candidate said to be competing for the presidency. At that time, the upper management was split in two and the atmosphere was tense. And Director Brown belonged to the faction of President Johnson's rival. When President Johnson won the dispute and became the executive president, his opponent left the company. I wasn't much connected to the upper management, so I wasn't aware that such a struggle was happening inside the company. No, I might have heard rumors, but I hadn't paid attention and hadn't been involved. I was just glad that my benefactor had taken the position of president. Is the factional dispute still relevant, President Johnson? Probably. My competitor left the company and now works for a rival firm. At President Johnson's words, I was startled. Don't tell me the personnel who left were. Probably, they were recruited by the rival company. So, that was why Director Brown's tyrannical behavior had occurred. So, Director Brown is connected to another company, you mean? Not just him. Several people in significant positions must be involved. Keeping it from my ears. Indeed, it was strange that rumors of such blatant misconduct hadn't reached the upper management. Somewhere, information was being manipulated and concealed. And these people were probably connected to a rival company, aiming to bring down our company from the inside. It's an act of betrayal against their own company. But why would someone in a director's position take such actions? Probably, those connected expect to be re-employed at the rival company, with decent terms if our company goes bankrupt. That's terrible. If our company actually went bankrupt, many people would lose their jobs. Subcontractors would be affected too. Yet, despite that, such sneaky and cowardly methods to destroy the company and settle scores, ensuring only those involved secure stable jobs, is indeed a terrible tale. They probably wanted you to resign, Mr. Harrison. But you contributed more to our company than expected, so they fired you. So, he fired me on a pretext because I wouldn't resign. Yes. As I said at the beginning, you hold the patents. If Mr. Harrison left our company, the damage would be immeasurable. President Johnson continued, frowning. And then, they intended to recruit you once you had resigned. Really? I don't think so. You probably would have been approached within a few days. If that's the case, the sudden dismissal makes sense. But I am displeased to be thought so easily swayed. That doesn't mean I would sell everything to a rival company. At least, as long as President Johnson is here. I had no intention of selling my patents to another company. They probably didn't even consider that. Really, it's demeaning to be underestimated. I'm really glad you're a man of integrity. President Johnson's face, which had been tense all this time, finally relaxed. Anyway, I have no intention of approving your dismissal, Daniel. If such documents have been submitted, I'll deal with them immediately. So, does that mean I'm not fired? Of course not. I want to build up this company together with you. At President Johnson's words, I was finally able to feel truly relieved. With that, it was clear what needed to be done. Well, it looks like a big cleanup is needed. President Johnson smiled calmly, but his eyes were ablaze with anger. From there, it was a race against time. While Director Brown and others still believed I was fired, President Johnson gathered trustworthy employees and executives to share information. Together, they uncovered several points of mistrust and rushed to gather evidence. President Johnson's assumption that Director Brown and his team would be lax after achieving their goal of firing me was correct. It seemed that the product development department had been despondent after I left. But Director Brown was in high spirits, leaving on time and heading out to dine. Identifying the executives and employees who went to the same place. They enjoyed the feast while the company's documents were being unlawfully taken out and tampered with, securing solid evidence. They discovered that significant funds, personnel, and technology had leaked to a rival company. The only thing left was to use these findings to purge the company of its pus. And then, on Monday morning, some employees and executives who came to work heard the unexpected decrees at the morning assembly from the president. What does this mean? I'm fired. Director Brown, who was causing a fuss, was joined by others who had received similar dismissal or demotion orders, starting an uproar. This is unjust personnel management, I'll sue. At such words, I could only scoff. What? Why are you here? Weren't you fired? Director Brown noticed me and started making frivolous complaints. But President Johnson cut him off with a single remark. I don't recall approving that. Who exactly authorized Daniel's dismissal? That is. Director Brown's eyes darted around, but no one met his gaze. Some of the HR employees blatantly looked away. Probably those who had processed my dismissal. Well, speaking of unjust personnel actions, let me explain the reasons for the personnel changes and dismissals right here. At President Johnson's words, the noisy crowd turned pale. Some tried to attack the president in their agitation and were caught by the security guards. Unbeknownst to me, security guards from the contracted security company had been positioned everywhere, ready to suppress any riot. The employees who were unaware of the situation were intimidated by the atmosphere. But as the president began to explain the recent events, they quieted down and eventually directed their anger towards those who had betrayed the company, particularly the product development department, which had been trampled on. Directed fierce glares at Director Brown. Noticing this, Director Brown was trembling with fear. He understood better than anyone the depth of their resentment. The murderous and scornful gazes directed at him were not something anyone could endure calmly. While I had no intention of turning this into a criminal case with a lawsuit, if they called this an unjust dismissal, the company was prepared to sue to prove its legitimacy, and they probably gave up. Director Brown and those involved in the wrongdoing slumped their shoulders, and some even knelt and sobbed. It was a pitiful sight, but I felt no sympathy. They had brought this upon themselves. Now that their scheme was exposed and they were dismissed, it was doubtful whether the rival company would truly take them in. Still, some hoped they could at least find re-employment somewhere. Personally, I doubted that someone who could coldly devise such a use and discard scheme would keep their promises. Nevertheless, the hellish days since Director Brown's appointment had come to an end like this. And so, I returned to the product development department. Considering the future, the employees, now promoted, welcomed me with open arms. The product development department had become somewhat lonely after many had left. But we finally restored a peaceful and healthy labor standard. Personnel was to be recruited anew, but fortunately, many employees who had left and not found employment elsewhere came back, which was a joyous occasion. Apparently, they had been approached by the rival company, but sensed something fishy about the timing and refused. They had even been threatened during the approach, which made them adamant about never going to such a company, and advised others who were considering leaving to avoid it, resulting in fewer defections to the rival company than we had expected. Some, including Director Brown, managed to find new jobs after being fired but were being exploited as mere regular employees. Ultimately, there probably wasn't a suitable position for them after the failed scheme. Still, it's a fact that many who knew our company's internals had moved to the rival company, which was a significant blow to us. However, if we consider that this incident helped us eliminate the widespread rot within the company, it was something we had to accept. Being able to continue doing the work I love at a company I like. Just regaining that everyday life was enough for me. But President Johnson was not the type to just let things slide. After all the processing was done smoothly, and it was time to welcome new employees, he reviewed the company's traditions and carried out major reforms. He implemented a thorough compliance policy and transformed the system into one where motivated individuals with skills and achievements could advance. In the process, the direction of the products was also revisited, and the information held by the employees who moved to the rival company became almost worthless. President Johnson, known for his calm and kind demeanor, underwent a re-evaluation through this series of mass firings and new reforms, earning respect from many employees. And some executives who had underestimated him were awed by his leadership. Thus, our company grew bigger and, a few years later, became renowned as a major corporation.